Fireside Tales. Hello, I'm Merlin Mililli. Welcome to my fireside, where I tell weird tales within tales. And I drink coffee. Coffee from my skull mug because I'm a deadhead. Little bear drinks water from his bowl because he's a bear. I don't know if you can hear it, but he's sure having a good drink over there. Little Bear is my dog. He likes to photobomb and audio bomb my show regularly. It's his favorite. So, every week here at Fireside Tales, we discuss the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records is a meditative library. It's a library that you can only get to through meditation. And pardon, Bear. Please don't eat the kitties. They're my friends. Anyhow, we discuss the Akasha every week. It's an ancient library. It's a metaphysical library that you can only get to through meditation. And in it, every soul has a book. And each book has a record of where, when, and who that soul has been. So I've been meditatively visiting my book in the Akashic Library since I was a teenager. I did a meditation when I was a teenager in which I met my spirit guides. And I did an introductory meditation, guided meditation here on the show to allow you at home to meet your spirit guides. I do not go to the Akashic Records without my spirit guides. They gave me a key when I was a teenager, and since then I've been going with them and my key to the Akashic Library. So every week we've been discussing my book in the Akashic Library. And my book has two different sides. One side is light and dry and sandy, and the other side is dark and wet and muddy. And everything before the watermark, which is what I call it, all the lives before the watermark are longer, and the lives after the watermark are shorter. And in my book, I have threads that connect each life to the next. Little things that just are very dear to me in each life. My cup is being very audible today. We'll let it complain. It's the wood on the... I don't know. Anyway, so the threads that connect each life to the next start with my first life, obviously, and carry on till this life now, in which I'm in this body. But fire is one major thread. And fire safety is something we discuss here every week at Fireside Tales. I have water in my little cauldron here, and I have water in my kettle up there, and I have water around the corner in my sprayer, and if you have a fire outside, you should have it lined with rocks and bear. He's after the cat food. Bear, come here. Leave the cat food alone, please. So, no, come here. Sorry, I just opened a big bag of cat food, and he really wants it, and I know that's what he's going for. So, I'm not wanting him to do that. So, you want to line your fire pit outside with rocks, and then you want to line that with rocks again, and then you want to make sure there's no overhanging, well, actually, before you choose your spot, you want to make sure there's no overhanging branches, and that none of them will grow into the way of the fire, so nothing can catch. You also want to make sure nothing's growing where you want to dig all the things that are growing out, and so that you just have dirt and rocks. And then you want a bucket of dirt and a bucket of water, or a bucket of dirt, and then you could put a pot of water on the fire if you have a grate. That's what I like to do. You never know when you might need hot water for something. So you may as well heat the water while you have a fire. I just always think you should make use of the fire besides for warmth. Other uses, like heating water. So it keeps farting every time I turn it. Skull must have gas. So, also, another one of my threads is smudging. This is dried sage. And when it's bound, like this, they call it a smudge stick. You light the smudge stick like an incense, and then you cleanse your aura with the smoke. Being careful not to catch anything else on fire. So that's smudging. That's for cleansing your aura or your outer energy. And then another of my threads is grounding, which cleanses your inner energy. I like to take my shoes off for grounding. It just gives you a better grounding. And then you want to blow out all the negativity that's inside you. And then you breathe in and think an over positive thought. And you breathe out positive. So that's fire, smudging, grounding. And then I do the grounding and the smudging before I do any meditating, divination, like reading tarot or runes. I read both. Rituals, any sort of rituals, so that you get the best possible outcome from your reading, from your ritual, from your meditation. To keep your insides and your outsides all sorts of positive. To get the most positive reading. So every week here at Fireside Tales, I've also been telling the story of the Grateful Dead. Because I'm a deadhead, but also because it's a story about reincarnation. And we discuss reincarnation at length here at Fireside Tales. One of my missions with this show was to enlighten the world as to exactly what reincarnation is, because it seems to me that people just don't really understand what it is. So I tell the story of the Grateful Dead because I'm a deadhead. Some of you may not understand what that is. A deadhead is someone who's really into the Grateful Dead, which is a 60s psychedelic rock band. And the Grateful Dead got their name from the story called The Grateful Dead that's in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And this story is in Sanskrit, which makes it even more difficult for people to understand. But I had the luck of hearing the story from a deadhead who could read Sanskrit. And I was told the story as it should be told, from a deadhead, by a fire. And so now I'm going to tell you the story as it should be told, from a deadhead. by a fire. Once, long, long ago, there was a traveler. It was so long ago that she traveled by foot. And one day, while she was traveling along, she happened upon a little village. And in the little village, as she got closer, she noticed a crowd. As she got closer still, she noticed that the crowd was arguing. As she got closer still, she noticed that the crowd was arguing over a dead body. Quite literally. Dead man was laying right there, and the people of the village were arguing over his debts and who was going to pay them, and his burial and who was going to bury him and who was going to pay for that. The traveler just thought this was all atrocious. She thought it was gross and disrespectful to the dead man laying there, despite having not known him at all. And she said, stop. She stopped the villagers from arguing, and she said, I will pay the dead man's debts. I will pay for a proper burial. And she did. She paid the dead man's debts, and she paid for a proper burial, and she prayed over his grave. And she traveled on. And then, decades later, the traveler, from the beginning of the story, happens upon a life or death situation in which, out of nowhere, a stranger just scoops her up and saves her life. The traveler says, who are you? Where did you come from? Why did you save my life? Thank you for saving my life. And the stranger simply says, I am the Grateful Dead. Because he's the man, the dead body that she paid for a proper burial. She paid his debts. She prayed over his grave. And he remembered her. He remembered her soul. He remembered her good deed. And he repaid it with another good deed. Because he was a reincarnated person. He died. That was established, right? Body's dead. Soul moves on into a new baby body in which it grows up to the point where it could save a life. Corpses, people have said it's a corpse at the end. Corpses don't save lives. Some people think it's a zombie at the end. Zombies don't save lives. So, it's a reincarnated person. It's a story about reincarnation. It's an old Buddhist story. The Grateful Dead got their name from a Funkin' Wagnall's dictionary that was talking about these stories in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the story of the Grateful Dead, which I just told you, as I heard from a deadhead by a fire, as it should be told. So, last season, our first season, we talked about each life just a little bit in my book. This season, we have gone all the way back to the beginning of my book, to my very first life, that of Little Flower, an ancient Mayan who lived in Peru 10,000 years ago. Now, I said that part of my book is light and dry and sandy. The beginning of my book is what's light and dry and sandy. And the lives in that part of the book are much longer. So, Little Flower's life and that of anyone else in the light part of my book was ultra long. Little Flower lived to be over 1,000 years old. And I know that seems ridiculous, but it's true. And this all seems ridiculous to some people. So, and some of it is rather ridiculous, but it is true. And the truth is stranger than fiction. So, we'll just get on with the truth, no matter how ridiculous. So, Little Flower was an ancient Mayan who lived in Peru 10,000 years ago. And she lived for over 1,000 years. And we've discussed all of these threads that started here with this life, Little Flower's life. We've discussed Little Flower's culture. Oh, we've discussed meditating. That's another thread. And being a psychic medium. The psychic medium thread enables me to still communicate with the spirit realm. And the spirit realm have a theory, excuse me, on reincarnation. I really don't want to call it a theory anymore because I really haven't been able to disprove it. Therefore, it's sort of truth now. But the spirits believe that reincarnated people are also people who have been murdered. Which would make a lot of sense because you get another chance to come back and try again if you get cut short. That makes sense. It's kind of fair. So, that being said, my book is really big and really thick. Excuse me, and really old. So, I have been murdered, if that is true, a lot. Because there's a lot of lives in my book. And the ones at the beginning are very long. The ones at the end are very short. Excuse me. So murder seems to be a thread, but it's like the only thread that isn't something really near and dear to me. I haven't gotten attached to murder, but I have apparently been murdered a lot. So, angels are another thread that start here with Little Flower. Astral projection is another thread that we've discussed here at Fireside Tales. Light, stars, stargazing, stones, turquoise, still a thread, interdimensional travel. These are all threads that we've discussed this season here at Fireside Tales. And we've also discussed what we know, history, what I know, her story, Little Flower's birth parents, her childhood, her schooling, her teen years, her higher education, her professions, her life, her love. She only had the one. We discussed her murder and motives for her murder. We discussed her afterlife. And last week we discussed time. I spoke about how I think my book is a record of my own personal all time, and that the Akasha is a record of all time. And my spirit guides, I discussed last week, that my spirit guides have been telling me since I was a teenager that all time is happening all the time. To say that, or to hear that, and to understand that are two totally different things, and we discussed that last week. This week, we're wrapping up the season. So this week, I am discussing my book, but mainly I want to discuss that watermark and what I think about the watermark, because I think it marks the Great Flood. And yes, I said, you heard right. This is our last episode of this season. We'll be back in August with a new season. I'm going to skip the cloud bird that I've discussed, and I'm going to skip the Buddhist monk. I believe I was a Buddhist monk, and I believe that I am not really at liberty to discuss that life at all. So I'm not going to. So we're going to come back with season 3, and for all of season 3, we're going to discuss a very long life lived in ancient Egypt by my soul, which is in my book. So, the watermark. This watermark in my book, it divides time, like from BC to AD, where it seems to mark right where time changed from BC to AD. Now they call AD recorded time. What if it's just after the flood recorded time? What if all the things that were recorded in what we know now as BC time, what if it was just all wiped out by the flood? That's what I think. And there's numerous different cultures that didn't have any connection with one another that have documented this great flood. They didn't have any communication or connection with one another, and yet they've all documented the same flood. They just make it up at the same time. Seems strange and silly. And then we all started writing everything down at the same time. We can't even decide on time and whether to call it BC or something else, or we can't decide anything as a people. So that's not how that was decided. We started writing things down again when the water receded because of the Great Flood. Now, the lives that are in the light, dry, sandy part of my book are from before the Great Flood. And it's strange that they're long, extra long in my book. And then there's the King's List. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's a stone, and carved into the stone is this King's List, and it's in like 4 different languages on 4 different sides of the stone. And each language says that the first kings lived thousands of lives, and some historians think it's like a misinterpretation of time, or they had a different system, or it was... But I don't think it's that at all. I think those kings actually lived for thousands of years. That everybody lived for thousands of years, pretty much. That was life expectancy. That was what we were given at first. And then when the Great Flood came, we ended up living much less, much shorter lives. So I think it happened, obviously, thousands of years after Little Flower died, but it divides my book in such a way that you just can't deny it's there. And what I remember from that time period, now I say remember, my memories, when I go to my book, I touch the book in a certain place, at the beginning for Little Flower, in the middle for the Great Flood, and then I have a memory. It's a meditative book, so it's not like reading, right? And I don't have to speak the language I spoke. I can just understand via memory. These are my soul's memories, so I can remember them. So, in my book, At the Great Flood, it's actually a lot like today. There's war and famine and strife and problems and fires and natural disasters and all kinds of things going on. So no one understands that this isn't a war tactic by someone, or most people think it's a war tactic by God, that God wants to stop. And still to this day, it's written that this was sort of a war tactic by God in the Bible and in other holy books that talk about the Great Flood. It happened because man was being evil. So people didn't really notice that everything was flooding, because on land there was war and there was famine and there was fire and there was strife, and everyone that got on boats, at least me, I got on a boat. And I got on that boat because there were fires and war and strife on land, right? It was like to escape, thinking that I was just going to float off to another place. But then once we got on the boats, we noticed there weren't other places. And then we noticed that the place we'd come from was underwater. And then, places that we knew were there once were not. I remember looking over at what I expected to be all of Europe, and it was gone. It was all underwater. Except for the little topmost mountain in Scotland that was sticking out. And so everyone ended up there. And as the waters receded, the people receded down the mountain and ended up back in Europe and places of that sort. But we really had no real idea how long we were out at sea. No one was counting at first. We only started counting after, there wasn't anything where Europe should have been, and when we didn't have any idea what was going on. No one did. Thus, the reset was just it was like a set. It wasn't really a reset, because everything had been so upset. So yeah, I just think that watermark marks the Great Flood. And the more I've researched it, and the more I've looked into it, and the more I've meditated on it, and the more I've thought about it, and the more I've looked at the actual history, I just keep proving it to be true. So I think it's true. I think it's real. And it happened right there where BC and AD start. Well, where AD starts, BC ends. And, maybe as punishment, we had shorter lives, or maybe that was more manageable for the planet for us to have shorter lives, or, excuse me, maybe it was just a result of all the water. We are like 75% or something ludicrous like that water. So our bodies are kind of flooded. And the planet is a ridiculous amount of water as well. So flooding happens. And yes, it's a bringer of life, but it can also be a quasher of life as well. So, like I said, this is the end of season 2. This is our last episode of season 2. Woo! I am hoping to go on Dead and Company's last tour this summer, so maybe I'll see you there. I want to do the whole tour, see what happens. Okay, so next season we'll be back in August to discuss my soul's life in ancient Egypt. So we'll be back and we'll start with ancient Egypt, and we'll discuss ancient Egypt for the whole season. Different aspects of a very long life in ancient Egypt. So that should be a fun season. And maybe we can do some live shows or some live studio audience shows. We'll see how it goes. Working into new stuff. And speaking of new stuff, I wrote a new song, fairly new. I was singing David Crosby's Deja Vu every week, but then because Deja Vu was the only song I could think of or found that is about reincarnation, and we discuss reincarnation here at Fireside Tales. So then I wrote Before, which is my song about reincarnation. Last week I sang David Crosby's Deja Vu because David just passed away, and so I wanted to sing it one last time for David and say thanks to him for everything he's done, providing us with the song and many other songs and inspiration and all that. So I'm going to sing Before, After. As the last part of the show, I realize it's kind of silly to sing Before, After, but I like it at the end. You'd think I'd have it memorized by now, and I pretty much do, but I like to have my safety net of my words. It's not the music or anything, it's just the words, in case I forget. I have a lot of things to remember these days, so mostly my brain has reserved most of my memory services to remembering song lyrics and key and verse and tone and songs. My brain reserves its memory for song memorization. Mostly. Reincarnation, 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 reincarnation. I'm back, I'm back, I'm back. Somebody stabbed me in the back, and now I'm back. I'm back, I'm back, I'm back. But I lack memory of who I was. I must look back, but I lack memory of who I was. Before, before. Then I opened the door and I found out who I'd been. No more! No more! No more! Before! 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 Whew. It's warm by the fire here. So, that's it for me today and for the season. So that's exciting. I'm excited to get out in the world and do some things, and see some people, and make some new friends, and meet some people, and make some new fans, and so yeah, that's it for me. Have a weird and wonderful weekend. Have a weird and wonderful 2023. Thanks for starting both your weekend and your year by my fireside. Thanks for watching. A Mililli Studios production.